Hello, guys. Good evening from this country, the Philippines. It's Roddy again, and tonight I'm going to be talking about English language learning and friendship as I think an important part of learning English or any language for that matter. Okay, so for me, learning English is quite difficult. Partly, it's partly difficult because while it is true that there are lots of learning materials online, it is also true that I think we live in a friendless world. And when I say friendless world, I don't mean that everyone is very unfriendly, or that you have no friends, or that I have no friends. What I'm saying is, I do have friends, and I do believe that you guys have friends, perhaps lots of them. But when I say we live in a friendless world, I mean, yes, it may be true that we have friends, but those friends of ours are usually busy with their jobs or with their academic projects, if you will. And so, because everyone's busy, and certainly everyone's tired when they get home, no one really has any time to spend with their friends. Now, of course, friendship involves communication in a shared language, just like English, for example. Now, if you have no, if your friends are busy or that you have no friends to speak with because your friends are busy, then obviously you don't have anyone to communicate with. And so you cannot practice your English. Now, one of the possible arguments against my claim is that you guys could say, well, there are websites or groups where you could, if you wanted to, practice your English with different people from different parts of the world. Now, that's also true. But I would argue that, learning English, at least to me, is not just about being able to communicate, but it's also about being able to communicate about things that are meaningful and interesting for you. So, for example, if I joined, let's say, a group, or I signed up, on a website so that I could speak with different people in English, the next question would be, what are we going to talk about? What will be the topic? And of course, at least in my experience, in those websites or Facebook groups where people practice English, they usually talk about topics that are usually seen in the IELTS exam or the TOEIC exam, such as shopping, environment, hometown, accommodation, habits or routine, television, things of that nature. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that those topics are fundamentally boring. I'm not saying that those things are not worth talking about. But the problem, at least for me and for people like me, is that while those topics could really start conversations, they usually, in my opinion, just revolve around those topics. So, for example, if let's say, for example, if you joined a website or a Facebook group and they talked about, let's say shopping, they would only talk about, well, do you usually buy online? Do you buy things offline or offline? Right? They don't talk about, let's say, more compelling topics. So, for example, if the topic is shopping, then they could, if they wanted to, expand that topic into maybe a subtopic, but that is much more compelling. So, for example, if we were talking about shopping, we could talk about, let's say, consumerism and ethics, for example. So that's obviously much more compelling. But then I think not many people are interested in such compelling topics. Okay? So it's not easy for me and people like me to practice and learn English, especially if we are talking about English as a global language. Okay? To me, again, I'm not saying, again, that topics like shopping, transportation, hometown, topics that appear in the IELTS exam or the TOEIC exam, I'm not saying that they are not worth our time, or that we shouldn't even talk about them because they're useless. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is, to me, they are like small talks. For example, what's the weather like? That's a small talk. Or what did you have for dinner? That's a small talk, right? But then small talks should lead to compelling topics. Like, for example, again, consumerism and ethics. Let's say school and politics, for example. Now that's also controversial. But then again, these talk, in my experience, I've never seen any group that deals with such topics, and even when they do, they rarely do it. I don't know why. Is it because these topics demand advanced vocabulary and advanced grammar? But then that's what people aim for usually, at least in my experience. People want to reach the C1 level of the CEFR or the C2 level. But then how would people achieve those levels or any of those levels if they were not, if they were not to be given chances to even really apply advanced vocabulary and advanced grammar and those sorts of things. C1 things, if you will, or C2 things. And so again, maybe I'm just stupid. I don't know. Maybe I'm just really stupid. But to me, I really learn effectively when, I really learn English effectively when I'm using it to think about and speak about compelling topics. Okay, I'm not saying that learning doesn't take place for me when, let's say, I'm talking, when I'm starting small talks or when I'm having small talks with my friends. I'm not saying that. But when I'm having small talks with my friends, they always lead to compelling topics. For example, I and a friend of mine were talking about, schools in their country. And then that led us to having a conversation about AI and education. And then that led us to talking about AI and education and ethics. Okay, so that was really meaningful for me and for my friend. But that, in my experience and observations, rarely happens in English language groups. I'm not saying that they are useless, it's just that they are not enough for me and for people like me. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that small talks are bad or unhelpful or that, the topics in the IELTS exam are boring. I'm not saying those things. I'm not saying that those things are just boring objectively. All I'm saying is to me, they are small talks that should preferably lead to compelling topics that would really make you think and speak carefully, or maybe even write carefully. So that's what I think. Thank you very much for listening.